I want you to become a ninja at noticing the thoughts that are coming up in your head and really pay attention to times when you start to feel anxiety or you start to feel kind of hopeless about something or worried or fearful, and look for the thought. And then as soon as you find it, okay, this is the predominant thought. It's going to be a terrible meeting. This person doesn't want to be my friend. Just open yourself to the opposite. Might be a terrible meeting. It might not be. They might not want to be my friend, but they might actually just be busy. Hi friends, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about a very simple little tip that helps with reducing anxiety and really reducing this feeling of overthinking something. And I realize that on the show, sometimes I can kind of talk about really big concepts that are maybe kind of vague. But in this episode, my goal is to give you such a simple, tangible little tip that I hope you will take with you and will help you really to just reduce moments of anxiety and help you just feel that you have a little more control over your thoughts. Okay, so we're going to start with a little example of how in my own life, I found myself in a situation where I was starting to kind of create some anxiety and some overthinking. So my kids are in high school. I have 2 kids. And myself as a student, because I'm in graduate school, and obviously I went to high school and college and all of that, I really take it upon myself to do well and to not get in trouble. I think I have something, I have something about not wanting to get in trouble or be sent to, God forbid, a principal's office. And actually, I think the only time in my entire school career that I was sent to the principal's office was in 4th grade when my friend Jill and we did a prank in the restrooms. In full transparency, I was just going along with her because she was way cooler than me and she had a whole plan, and her whole idea was let's put plastic wrap over all the toilets, but we'll pull it really tight so no one will see that there's plastic wrap on it. And anyways, it was this whole elaborate thing. And so I kind of went along with it. And of course, we got sent to the principal's office and it was a whole thing. And ever since then, just as a student, I want to do really well, want to maintain my 4.0. And I don't want to be on anyone's radar as getting in trouble. And so my kids, they're in high school. They're in charge of getting themselves to school and getting themselves to class. And they've both been having a lot of tardies. And so for me, my graduate school is online. And so I'm always logging into my class a minute early. I have almost perfect attendance. But if I'm not going to be there or if I'm going to be late, I'm emailing my professor and making sure that I'm just on top of it. Right. Well, my kids have been really racking up some tardies. And so I get a call from the school. Hey, we want to have a meeting with you to sit down and talk about your kids' tardies. And so immediately I start to feel some anxious thoughts. And I have some awareness that this is my own feeling of I'm getting in trouble. I'm being sent to the principal's office. And it was a vice principal. And I started kind of creating this idea in my mind, this thought that this is going to be terrible, right? I'm going to sit there. They probably think I'm a terrible parent. This is going to impact my kids' ability to do well in school. I had a lot of these kind of negative thoughts around this meeting and just thinking that I wouldn't be able to handle this meeting. And so these thoughts kind of got me to feel more anxious and kind of worried. And then what I did was I pushed the meeting off. It's no, I can't come on this day. Let's push it back a few weeks. Which really, I was just pushing back the inevitable because ultimately I was going to go to this meeting. I was going to show up and I was going to have to deal with it. But I really started tuning into how the thoughts that I had about this meeting were all really fear-based and really kind of negative, and how those thoughts then created the emotion of anxiety and worry, and almost like the fear I felt probably as a fourth grader being called into the principal's office. And as a result of having these negative fear-based feelings, the action that I took was, I don't want to go to this meeting, so I'm going to delay having to have this meeting. And so I told the school, let's push it back. And so I realize that this is such a great teaching opportunity on how thoughts, emotions, and actions are all linked together. And this is something 2 days a week I'm working with students in a junior high, and this is something that we work on all the time, right? We work on a lot of anxiety, and so we list off the thoughts. So in this situation, what are the thoughts that you're having? And so for me, those thoughts that I had around this meeting, they were all very fear-based. Like, first of all, the thought was, this is going to be terrible. Like, just sitting there, having to even go to the principal's office already, just my overriding thought was like, this is going to be terrible. And I didn't really leave a lot of room for any other thoughts other than this is going to be terrible. And then, the emotion that went along with that thought was that anxiety and that fear. And then my action was like, nope, don't want to do it. Don't want to be there. Let's push it off. And so, the fact that I work with a lot of students on their thought process in that time after I pushed off the meeting and I had time to reflect, I was like, okay, I'm going to do, we call it the CBT triangle, cognitive behavioral therapy. Like, I'm going to do this on myself. So starting with thoughts, okay, my original thought was, this is going to be terrible. And so this is the trick I want to teach you today. Giving yourself other options. So, and I always start with this one with my students. It's like, okay, well, what's the opposite of that thought? So on one hand, this is going to be terrible. And notice that the language is so like somehow I know, like I've already determined this is going to be terrible. And then opening myself to another option, or this might not be terrible, right? And I said might because we just don't know. So we go from this is going to be terrible to, or this might not be terrible. So now I have two options, right? And I went through, another list of what could happen. The principal is going to think I'm a terrible parent, or the principal might not think I'm a terrible parent, right? Opening myself to this optional other thought. And immediately, when I gave myself these other options, your emotions shift and change, and new emotions are added to the mix. So the anxiety and the fear of sitting there in the vice principal's office was reduced, right? Just from going from the thought of this is going to be terrible to this is going to be terrible, or it might not be terrible. They're going to think I'm a terrible parent, or they might not think I'm a terrible parent. Just leaving myself open that option. Immediately, the anxiety was maybe cut in half. And then I also had just more of like a calm feeling that was kind of added to the mix, which probably contributed to why the anxiety went down. And then as far as my actions, because before I did this little exercise, I was seriously considering pushing the meeting off again. But once I did this and I opened myself to a couple of other thoughts, which made room for a couple of other emotions, I kept the meeting. It's like, you know what? I can do this. And so the meeting turned out to be an actual pleasant experience for me, where the vice principal was kind of reiterating the things that I already tell my kids about the importance of getting to school on time and not being tardy. And so I actually felt supported as a parent in that setting, and felt, a good rapport and connection with a vice principal who was clearly like invested in his job and looking out for the well-being of my kids and of our family. And so the experience turned out to be something that I would say was much more positive than it was negative. But if we went back to my initial thoughts when I first got the notification, like, hey, we have to have a meeting, and this thought that was just like written in my mind like law, like this is going to be terrible, it turned out it was completely incorrect. And this happens to us all the time. This is a very like natural experience to kind of lock on to a negative thought, not as a possibility, but as a reality, right? The thought comes into your head and it's like, it is this way. And so the trick that I'm teaching you today is that whenever you find this happening, to give yourself the other option. So this is going to be terrible, or this might not be terrible. And it sounds like such a tiny little thing because it is, but just in making that tiny, it's almost like you're opening the window for some other possibilities, because at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, it could have been a terrible meeting, right? But it also could have been fine. If I was just sold on the fact that it's going to be terrible, then my emotions and my actions are going to be based on believing that that's a fact versus giving myself more options, allowing myself to access a bigger range of emotion, right? I still had some anxiety, still had some worry, but I also had some calm. I actually had a little bit of hopefulness too going into it. And then it allows us to have more options with our actions. So I had another experience, and actually this one happened today as I was like thinking about this. I have a friend who I've kind of fallen out of touch with, who I used to spend a lot more time with. But in recent years, like the contact has been less and there's been like more months in between, having contact. And this is a very common experience that happens to a lot of us, right? Like periods of our life, we're spending more time with certain people and then that relationship might get a little more distant. And in this particular case, I was getting the impression that whenever there was any contact, I would be the one to reach out. And then after realizing like, okay, this friend isn't reaching out to me anymore, the thought that was kind of coming up in my head was, well, she doesn't want to hang out with me anymore, right? And that's kind of a kind of logical, right? I think a lot of us would probably come to that conclusion. Like, hey, you keep reaching out, and maybe you're reaching out like a little less and a little more time goes in between, but you're still reaching out and they're never reaching out to you, right? Maybe they'll reply, but they're not initiating a reach out, whereas in the past, maybe they would. And so that thought of they don't want to hang out with me anymore, maybe they just don't like me anymore, they don't, want to do anything with me, right? That's kind of like the default thought. And I realized today that I've had that thought. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to open myself to other options. And so I was like, or maybe there's just other things going on in this person's life that have nothing to do with me. Maybe they don't want to be my friend, or maybe they're just busy. And I opened myself to that idea. And my emotions, which really had been kind of disappointed, kind of sad, I think I was kind of feeling a little bit sorry for myself, like, man, this person doesn't want to be my friend anymore. But as soon as I opened the door to, or maybe she's just busy, or maybe she has something else going on in her life, my thoughts or my emotions shifted to, now I had a little bit of sad and disappointment still, but then I had a little bit of concern for her. Like, man, if she's going through something, maybe I could be there. Or, like there's more to her life than just me. And so my emotional range opened up, and then the action that I had been taking was just nothing. Like, I just wasn't doing anything. I kind of stopped reaching out because it just didn't seem like it was going anywhere. And then, my thought pattern kind of shifted me in that way. And so now that I opened up to other options, my emotional range opened, and then my actions. I was like, you know what? I'm going to text this friend. And I sent the text. And this time, actually, an invitation to spend some time together came back at me, which was really exciting. I was like, man, because I decided to give myself other options and not just get sold on the first negative thought that comes to mind. It shifts the emotions. And when the emotions shift, what we do, our actions, our behavior changes. And so this is what I want to leave you with today. This skill. I want you to become a ninja at noticing the thoughts that are coming up in your head and really pay attention to times when you start to feel anxiety or you start to feel kind of hopeless about something or worried like I was about that meeting or fearful, right? And look for the thought. And then as soon as you find it, okay, this is the predominant thought. It's going to be a terrible meeting. This person doesn't want to be my friend. Just open yourself to the opposite, right? Might be a terrible meeting. It might not be. They might not want to be my friend, but they might actually just be busy, right? And then watch how things shift in a positive way. And we really get out of this being trapped with the anxiety and then being trapped with just that process, which we like to call like overthinking. But I think it's really fixating on one negative thought, giving ourselves options to think other thoughts. So I hope this was helpful, and this is something that you can really start applying to your life right now. Maybe there's something in your life today, in this moment, that you're feeling anxiety about or that you're dreading, that maybe you can think about what's that predominant thought, and then give yourself the gift of another option and see how everything shifts. I hope this has been helpful. If you like this content in this channel, please like it, subscribe, send it to a friend, and I will be back next week with another message.